I should have known she was planning to destroy me the moment she smiled when I suggested the vacation. That smile, Christ, I can still see it now, sitting here in what used to be our kitchen 6 months later. It wasn't the warm, genuine expression I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. This was different, calculated, like she'd been waiting for me to hand her exactly what she needed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real moment I should have known my marriage was over wasn't when I caught Jenna in that hotel room with Marcus Webb's hands all over her. It was 3 weeks earlier, when she stopped looking me in the eye during dinner. We were eating the chicken parmesan I'd made, one of the few dishes I could manage after 12-hour shifts at the construction site. I was telling her about the problems we'd had with the foundation pour that day, how the concrete truck broke down and cost us half a day's work. Normal conversation, the kind of thing married couples share. She nodded in all the right places, made appropriate sounds of sympathy, even asked a follow-up question about whether we'd meet our deadline. But her eyes never left her plate. When I really thought about it later, she hadn't made eye contact with me in weeks. That's when the paranoia started creeping in, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Her phone was always face down now. She'd started this new fitness routine, buying clothes I'd never seen before. Not the practical stuff she usually wore, but things with lace and colors that made her skin glow. When I'd reach for her shoulder while she was doing dishes, she'd flinch like my calloused hands might leave marks on her silk blouse. "We should take a vacation," I said one evening in late March, the words tumbling out before I'd really thought them through. "Just the two of us. Get away from everything." That's when she gave me that smile. "Oh, David," she said, and for a split second, her eyes met mine with something that looked like pity. "That sounds wonderful." I should have paid attention to the pause, should have noticed how quickly she recovered, how her voice got that bright, artificial quality it took on when she was performing for her mother's church friends. "Where were you thinking?" she asked, already pulling out her phone. "That place up in Grand Lake, the resort with the cabin rentals." I'd been researching it for weeks, looking at pictures of couples holding hands by the water, imagining Jenna and me walking those trails like we used to when we were dating. "I've been working doubles for 2 months. We can afford it." "Perfect," she said, typing rapidly. Then she looked up, and I swear I saw calculation flash across her features before the performance resumed. "You know what? We should ask Lily to come with us." My stomach dropped. "Your sister? On our romantic getaway?" "Just for support. You know how I get anxious in new places." She was already texting, probably to Lily herself. "Besides, she's been so depressed since her separation. It would be good for her." Lily had been separated from her husband Rob for 6 months, though she seemed to spend more time out at bars than mourning her marriage. But Jenna had always been protective of her younger sister, and I'd learned to pick my battles. "Sure," I said, "if it'll make you happy." She beamed at me then, a real smile this time, or at least a better imitation of one. "You're the best husband in the world, David." 3 days later, I was packing for what I thought would be a chance to save my marriage. That's when I found the lingerie in her suitcase. Black lace, expensive, tags still on. I'd never seen her wear anything like it. In 15 years of marriage, Jenna's idea of sexy sleepwear was one of my old construction t-shirts. But here was evidence of a whole different person, someone who bought silk and lace and knew exactly how good she looked in it. Someone who just wasn't buying it for me. I stood there in our bedroom, holding that scrap of fabric, and felt the first real crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my life. The drive to Grand Lake should have been peaceful. Spring in Colorado meant clear mountain air and valleys full of wildflowers, the kind of scenery that makes you remember why you chose to build a life here instead of chasing big city dreams. Instead, I spent 3 hours watching my wife and sister-in-law exchange glances in the rearview mirror. They thought they were being subtle, little looks when they thought I was focused on the road. Lily would catch Jenna's eye and raise an eyebrow, or Jenna would give her sister a tiny shake of the head. It was like watching two people communicate in a language I didn't speak, making plans I wasn't invited to understand. "Beautiful country up here," I said, trying to fill the silence that had settled over the car like fog. Jenna murmured, her attention on her phone. Always that damn phone now. Her thumbs moved constantly across the screen, and with each message, her face would brighten in a way that made my chest tight. "Remember when we used to camp up here?" I tried again. "Before we got married? You said it was the most beautiful place you'd ever seen." "Of course I remember." She didn't look up. "That was a long time ago." Lily shifted in the back seat. "Jenna tells me you've been working a lot of overtime lately." It wasn't a question, but it felt like one anyway, like I was being interviewed for something. "Construction season's busy, good money while it lasts." "Must be hard on the marriage, though. All those long hours." I caught her eyes in the mirror. There was something almost predatory in her expression, like she was probing for weak spots. "We manage fine." "I'm sure you do." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Jenna's lucky to have such a dedicated husband." The way she said dedicated made it sound like a character flaw. The Lakeside Pine Resort was exactly what the website had promised. Rustic cabins scattered around a pristine mountain lake with a main lodge that served decent food and strong drinks. Our cabin had 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a view of the water that should have been romantic. Jenna claimed exhaustion after dinner and went to bed before 9, leaving Lily and me at the lodge bar. This hadn't been part of my plan for reconnecting with my wife, but Lily seemed determined to keep me company. "She's been under a lot of stress lately," Lily said, nursing her 3rd gin and tonic. The alcohol was making her talkative, less careful with her words. "What kind of stress?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Oh, you know, work stuff, family stuff." She waved her hand vaguely. "Sometimes a woman just needs space to figure things out." "Figure what out?" I asked. Lily's eyes went wide, like she'd said more than she meant to. "Nothing specific, just life, you know? Sometimes you reach a point where you have to make some hard choices about what you really want." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. 15 years of managing construction crews had taught me not to react until I had all the information. "Hard choices," I repeated. "I've said too much." She finished her drink in one gulp. "Forget I said anything. I'm drunk and talking nonsense." But she wasn't drunk enough to be careless by accident. Everything about this conversation felt rehearsed, like she was testing how much I suspected, how much I might already know. The next morning at breakfast, Jenna was glued to her phone again. Every ping of a new message made her face light up like Christmas morning, the kind of pure joy I hadn't seen from her in months. "Digital detox day," I suggested, trying to sound casual. "Let's leave the phones in the room and just enjoy being here." Both women immediately objected. "I need to stay available for work," Jenna said. "What if there's an emergency?" Lily added. "It's Saturday," I pointed out. "Emergencies don't follow the calendar," Jenna snapped, then caught herself and softened her tone. "I just feel better knowing I can be reached if needed." That afternoon by the pool, everything came to a head. Jenna excused herself to make a phone call, claiming she needed to check on something important. I watched her walk toward our cabin with her phone pressed to her ear. But something about her body language was wrong. The way she moved, the expression on her face. This wasn't a business call or even a casual conversation with a friend. This was intimate, secretive. In her nervousness and the heat of the moment, Jenna had forgotten to maintain her usual careful deception. I made my decision right there by the pool, with Lily desperately trying to distract me with spilled drinks and inappropriate flirting. I was going back to that cabin, and I was going to find out exactly what kind of call required that much privacy. Some foundations can't be repaired. Sometimes you have to tear everything down and start over. The cabin door was ajar. Such a small detail, but it stopped me cold on the wooden steps. In 15 years of marriage, Jenna had never left a door unlocked, let alone standing open. She was obsessive about security, the kind of woman who checked the deadbolt 3 times before bed. But there it was. Our supposed sanctuary cracked open like an invitation, or maybe like a wound that couldn't quite heal shut. I pulled out my phone and started recording before I took another step. Some instinct born from years of documenting construction defects and insurance claims kicked in. Whatever was about to happen, I'd need proof. The voices hit me first. Jenna's laugh, breathy and wild in a way I hadn't heard since our honeymoon. Then a man's voice, low and confident, saying things that made my hands shake as I held the phone steady. "God, I've missed you," the voice said. 2 weeks felt like forever. "I know, baby. But we had to be careful. David's been watching me more closely lately." David. My own name, spoken like a problem to be managed. I moved closer to the partially open bedroom door, keeping the phone aimed through the gap. The image on the screen was small but clear enough. My wife of 15 years tangled up with Marcus Webb, the smooth-talking regional sales manager from the Lexus dealership where she'd bought her car last month. Marcus Webb, all polished charm and expensive suits, the kind of man who smelled like cologne and made promises about luxury that my honest paycheck could never deliver. Everything I wasn't, refined, well-dressed, and apparently convinced that other men's wives were just another commodity to be acquired. "When are you going to tell him?" Marcus asked, his hands moving through her hair like he owned her. "Soon," Jenna whispered. "I just need to get everything in place first. The accounts, the lawyer, all of it. He can't know until I'm ready." "You've been saying soon for months." "I know. But you don't understand David like I do. He seems harmless, but when he's angry..." She shuddered, and I realized she was setting up a narrative, playing the victim before she'd even struck the blow. "He's never hurt you, has he?" "Not physically. But the emotional manipulation, the way he makes me feel guilty for wanting more than this life he's trapped me in." Her voice broke with practiced vulnerability. "Sometimes I think he does it on purpose. Keeps me isolated so I'll be dependent on him." I almost laughed at the cruel irony. She was describing exactly what she'd been doing to me for months: the emotional manipulation, the guilt, the isolation. But she was painting herself as the victim of her own tactics. They kept talking, but I'd heard enough. The recording was 3 minutes long and contained everything I needed: proof of the affair, evidence of her plan to divorce me while claiming abuse, and enough detail about their timeline to establish that this wasn't some recent mistake, but a calculated campaign. I backed away from the door as quietly as I'd approached. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, all from Jenna and Lily wondering where I was, demanding I answer, growing increasingly frantic as they realized their carefully orchestrated deception was falling apart. The drive home took 4 hours. 4 hours of ignoring the constant buzz of my phone, 4 hours of watching the mountains give way to plains, 4 hours of planning what came next. By the time I reached our neighborhood, I wasn't the same man who'd packed hopefully for a romantic getaway 3 days earlier. That man had believed in redemption, in the possibility that love could overcome any obstacle if you just tried hard enough. This man understood that some people mistake kindness for weakness, loyalty for stupidity, and love for leverage. I stopped at Home Depot first. New locks, heavy-duty deadbolts, the kind that couldn't be picked or bypassed with a credit card. While I was there, I bought a small fireproof safe for important documents. Then I stopped at Office Depot for cloud storage backup drives and printed copies of the recording. By the time I got home, I'd already researched 3 divorce attorneys who specialized in adultery cases, forwarded the video to my personal email account from 3 different addresses, and made a list of everyone who needed to see what Jenna and Marcus thought they'd hidden. The house felt different when I walked in. Smaller somehow. Like learning the truth had changed the fundamental architecture of the place where I'd thought I was building a life. But foundations can be rebuilt. Sometimes that's the only choice you have. My garage had always been my sanctuary, the one place in the house where everything had its purpose and nothing was there just for show. Now it became something more, a command center for systematic justice. I'd cleared off my workbench and spread out everything like blueprints for a new construction project, printed copies of the recording transcript, financial statements going back 2 years, phone records I'd subpoenaed through Amanda Reeves, the divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict infidelity cases. "Most men in your situation want blood," Amanda had said during our first meeting, reviewing the evidence with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining X-rays. "They want to scream, break things, make dramatic gestures that feel good in the moment but hurt them in court." "I'm not most men," I'd replied. "No, you're not." She'd smiled then, the kind of expression a general might wear when surveying a battlefield. "That's why we're going to destroy them completely." The investigation had revealed the scope of Jenna's betrayal went far beyond sex in hotel rooms. She'd been planning her escape for months, systematically moving money to accounts I didn't know existed. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, but it added up to nearly $15,000 of our savings. More damaging was what I'd learned about her campaign to poison our social circle against me. Phone records showed dozens of calls to her mother, her sister, even my own brother, spreading carefully crafted lies about my behavior. How I was becoming controlling and paranoid. How she was scared to leave because of what I might do. The genius of it was how she'd used my own personality against me. My natural privacy, my tendency to work through problems internally rather than broadcasting them to friends and family. She'd twisted these traits into evidence of something sinister. "She's been building her victim narrative for months," Amanda explained, showing me text message chains she'd obtained through discovery. "Classic manipulation playbook. Isolate the target, control the narrative, then claim self-defense when you strike." Except Jenna had made one critical mistake. She'd chosen the wrong target. Tony Rodriguez, my crew chief, stopped by on a Thursday evening while I was working late in the garage. We'd been friends for 8 years, ever since he'd started working for my company, and he was one of the few people who knew the real story. "You doing okay, boss?" he asked, studying the organized chaos of papers and files covering every surface. "Better than okay," I said, showing him the latest discovery. "Turns out Marcus Webb isn't just an adulterer, he's a criminal." The background check Amanda had run revealed Marcus's pattern of financial fraud. He'd been using fake identities to avoid creditors, running up debt on credit cards issued to names that barely existed, then disappearing when the bills came due. His expensive lifestyle was built entirely on other people's money. "This guy's got warrants in 2 states, I told Tony. Fraud, identity theft, check kiting, and Jenna thinks he's going to take care of her once she leaves me." Tony whistled low. "Man's got bigger problems than your wife." "Had bigger problems," I corrected. "I solved them for him this morning." I'd made a series of phone calls that afternoon, to the fraud departments at 3 major banks, to the district attorney's office in Jefferson County, to Marcus's employer with copies of the evidence Amanda had compiled. By the time Marcus Webb tried to clock in for work the next morning, he'd discover that his carefully constructed house of cards had collapsed overnight. "What about Jenna?" Tony asked. I smiled and pulled out the final piece of my plan. Divorce papers that would strip her of everything she thought she'd cleverly hidden away, backed by evidence so comprehensive that no judge in Colorado would grant her a single concession. "She wanted a new life so badly," I said. "I'm going to give her exactly what she asked for." They returned on Sunday evening like conquering heroes. Jenna and Lily laughing as they climbed out of Lily's car with their overnight bags, and the glow of women who thought they'd pulled off the perfect crime. The laughter died when they realized their key wouldn't work. I watched through the front window as Jenna tried the lock 3 times, then pulled out her phone to call me. I let it ring while she and Lily exchanged panicked glances on my doorstep. When she tried again, I answered on the first ring. "Having trouble getting in?" I asked. "David, what's wrong with the lock?" "Did something happen to the house?" "Nothing happened to the house. I changed the locks," I replied. Silence. Then, "Why would you do that?" "Open your text messages," I replied. I'd sent her a single screenshot 30 minutes ago, a frame from the video showing her and Marcus in a position that left no room for interpretation. Not the whole recording, just enough to let her know exactly what kind of conversation we were about to have. "David, I can explain," she stammered. "No need. I'll be right out," I replied. I'd spent the morning preparing for this moment, arranging the living room like a courtroom. The divorce papers were stacked neatly on the coffee table beside printed copies of financial records, bank statements, and phone logs. Everything she'd thought was hidden, laid out like evidence in a murder trial. When I opened the door, Jenna's face was white as construction paper. Lily stood behind her, no longer the confident accomplice who'd spent months helping orchestrate my humiliation. "Let's talk inside," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Jenna moved like she was walking to her execution, which in a way, she was. Everything about her body language screamed guilt. The way she wouldn't meet my eyes, how her hands shook as she set down her purse, the careful distance she maintained from the coffee table where the evidence waited. "David, before you say anything—" "Sit down," I demanded. My voice carried the authority I used with construction crews when safety was on the line. No negotiation, no discussion, just compliance or consequences. She sat. "We need to discuss the divorce," I said, settling into the chair across from her like we were negotiating a business contract. "I've made this as simple as possible." The papers I handed her were comprehensive. No alimony, no claim to the house, no access to retirement accounts she'd never contributed to. Just a clean separation that would leave her with exactly what she'd brought to the marriage 15 years ago. Nothing. "You can't be serious," she whispered, scanning the terms. "Half of everything is mine by law." "Read the next page," I replied. The adultery clause was beautifully written, thanks to Amanda's expertise. In Colorado, infidelity doesn't automatically void marital property rights, but it can be used to justify an unequal distribution when combined with financial misconduct. Jenna's secret accounts, her months of lies, her systematic campaign to destroy my reputation, all of it documented and ready for court. "There's no way you can prove any of this," Lily said, finally finding her voice. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Jenna's voice filled the room, talking about getting everything in place while describing me as emotionally manipulative. Marcus's voice responding with intimate details about their affair. 3 minutes of crystal-clear evidence that would make any trial a formality. Jenna's face crumpled like a demolished building. "David, please. We can work this out. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," I said quietly. "It meant you've been planning to destroy me for months. It meant you've been poisoning everyone we know against me. It meant every day for the past year has been a lie." The front door opened before she could respond. I'd given a key to one more person who needed to hear this conversation. Jenna's mother, Carol, who'd spent 15 years treating me like a disappointing son-in-law who wasn't quite good enough for her precious daughter. Carol walked in prepared to defend Jenna, her mouth already open to deliver whatever lecture she'd rehearsed about my responsibilities as a husband. Instead, she heard her daughter's recorded voice describing how she'd manipulated our marriage while planning my destruction. The silence that followed was absolute. Carol looked at Jenna like she was seeing a stranger. How could you do this to him? To us? Mom, it's not what it sounds like. It's exactly what it sounds like. Carol's voice was hollow. I raised you better than this. 20 minutes later, they were gone. All of them. Even Lily had nothing to say as they loaded their shame into the car and drove away from the house where I'd thought we were building something permanent. I stood in my doorway and watched their taillights disappear, feeling lighter than I had in months. 6 months later, I stood on the foundation of a new house in Highlands Ranch, watching my crew prepare for the concrete pour. The October morning was crisp and clear, the kind of Colorado day that makes you grateful to be alive and working with your hands. Looks good, boss, Tony said, checking the forms one final time. This one's going to last forever. That's the plan. The foundation is everything in construction. Get it right, and the house will stand for generations. Cut corners, ignore the engineering, build on unstable ground, and eventually everything comes crashing down. It's a lesson that applies to more than just construction. Jenna's life had collapsed exactly as I'd predicted. The divorce was final within 3 months. She'd signed everything without contest once she realized fighting would only expose more of her lies to public scrutiny. Marcus Webb's legal troubles had multiplied exponentially. He was currently serving 18 months for financial fraud, and his wife had taken him for everything in their divorce. Lily's marriage hadn't survived the revelation of her role in the deception. Rob had filed for divorce as soon as he learned she'd been helping orchestrate affairs instead of working on her own relationship. The sisters were closer than ever now, bonded by mutual destruction and diminished prospects. I hadn't seen any of them since that final confrontation in my living room, though Jenna had tried to contact me twice. Once through a mutual friend, asking if we could talk things through like adults. Once directly, 3 weeks ago, with a text message that simply said, I was wrong about everything. Can we try again? My response had been brief. You wanted a vacation from our marriage. Enjoy the permanent one. The house was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years. I'd kept it exactly as it was, not from sentiment but from practicality. The mortgage was manageable on my income alone, the neighborhood was good, and I'd invested too much work in the renovations to walk away. Some evenings I sat on the deck I'd built by hand, drinking beer with Tony and the crew, talking about work and sports and everything except relationships. These men had stood by me when my marriage imploded, offering the kind of loyalty that can't be bought or manipulated. I built my life on solid foundations. She built hers on lies. Guess which one survived the earthquake? And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.